tape?
Run.
At 3:25. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Ethics, September 21st, 2011. Roll call.
Ms. Flannery,
Here.
Dr. Kelly,
Here.
Mr. Silver,
Here.
Ms. Phillips.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Great. The first, well, before approving the minutes, I'd like us to review the agenda. And I'd like to add as item D under new business, election of chair. And I also have a question about whether we want to discuss the issues raised by Julia Tucker related to the sponsoring of an ordinance by an assembly member, this whole email exchange. Do you think? So it was request for advisory opinion, I don't know the exact number. 2011-1?
One, I think.
So maybe it comes under old business as item C. Review of request for advisory 2011 -1. Okay. All right. Can I have
Private to the chair.
a motion on the agenda?
I move that we add the item D, election of chair, and the
Review of 2011.
review of 2011-1.
-1.
I'll second.
You can have copies of this made when we get to that point, or? So the first, there's no persons to be heard, no special orders, old business, item A, review disclosure forms. So while folks just review disclosure forms. And I'll just erase that. I think that's the only handwritten note I have on there.
Madam Chair, should we approve the minutes first?
Oh, sorry, you made a motion?
Well, I made a motion with respect to the
Do I have a second?
I seconded.
Vote? All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Okay. The agenda has been approved. Now, moving on. To minutes. All right, let's go to minutes. So minutes, the regular meeting, August 17th, 2011. I've reviewed them. They look correct to me. Anyone have any edits?
I move to approve the minutes for the August 17th, 2011 board meeting.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good. Okay. Persons to be heard, none. Special orders, none. Old business, item A, review disclosure forms.
It was 2 packets of disclosure forms, the ones from the last meeting, the ones from this meeting.
So that's what this one says under old business, was last meeting.
Oh, I see.
Well, that would be,
That's
this one's dated
confusing.
8/15, that doesn't, this one's dated late 11, the meeting was 8/17, right? Whatever.
I don't know. I pulled 3 out of both packets. So I went through both packets and I pulled 3.
Second.
And there's a $100 gift card from a parent
To
to a teacher.
cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a $100 gift card, another one to cars.
Same parent.
Oh, same parent. Different teacher?
Mhm.
Yep, okay. And then there's a $100 American Express gift card from a parent. Show of appreciation for working with their daughters. Daughters, I think it says.
Those are the ones I saw too.
Okay.
Well, can I ask a question? Why wouldn't we select the one here for $250 from Alyeska Resort?
Because it was a door prize.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed the door price issue. All right.
Okay.
Never mind.
motion would be to accept the disclosure forms, except for the 3 pulled, and I think it would be disclosure forms in total, the new ones and the old ones.
He got called off from another meeting.
Actually, we have $100 one here from American Express card from, for
Yep.
a parent,
And then a Walmart.
Brad Goetz, and one for Walmart for $100, for Melissa Johnson. So these 2 new business items also, in my opinion, should be.
Received from Walmart? So we're pulling out the ones that we get from,
We are, well, but this one here is definitely from a parent.
yeah, I pulled that one. I have, I think. So I have 2 for cars and 1 from American Express. So I have 3
Okay.
$100 ones.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a Walmart gift card, it's from.
It is from Walmart.
Right. Teacher recognition. I don't know. We haven't really
Okay, I'm not as much of an issue with that one. I think.
formalized an opinion on the ones received from other than parents.
You know, and what do you think about for these ones that we've pulled? I wonder if the dates make a difference. Like the American Express card says it's relation to the donor. Is that former parent? So shows appreciation for working with their daughter. So this might be a gift they've received after the daughter is no longer
Former
a
parents.
student. And then the Cars Safeway gift card's given on 6/19. I don't know how the calendar, what the ASD, but that might be after grades have already been submitted.
It is.
I don't know what we want to do about those, but I would have to say that I'm less concerned about these kind of gifts when they're given after the student is no longer a student with the teacher.
Well, I think the only way we can find out is for somebody to call and ask. Does anyone
I
want to
see.
call and ask?
Well, I feel that we've set, or sort of set a precedent almost, that we should just continue with such, I mean, the idea is to educate the teachers anyway, and sort of prevent them from future things, so.
So they would be getting the form letter. You want to review the form letter?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at the form letter. But I think, doesn't the form letter say something like, we think you're in violation of the code, or something on, in essence, right? Doesn't it say?
I think it says you could be found to be in violation.
Yeah, which I guess would be
Maybe.
would be
I don't know.
true in these kind of cases.
Do you
But,
want
but
to
I think
tweak?
I
Do you want to
think-
tweak the form letter and say, you know, if this is a student that's no longer in your class, we don't have a problem with it. But if it is a student that you're going to continue to be in your class, then blah 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 blah.
Yeah, I guess there's that concern, right? If will they have the student again?
Yeah.
As a
Or
student.
another student from the family. I guess I'm concerned about creating an intentional gap or a spot where somebody could still receive stuff. Well, there's not kids not in my class anymore, Chris, so I can accept it. I mean, I don't know if what we're trying to do is try to stop them from receiving or the conflict.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's my sense that, you know, certainly once the student is not a student anymore for the teacher, then certainly that diminishes the conflict, right? I mean, because there's no more judgments to be made regarding that student and, and their impartiality. It is true that they had other kids from the family, or if they had other students in the future, that could be a problem. But it does seem to me at any rate, that's really different from getting the $100 gift a week before grades are due. To me, that looks like a conflict of interest.
I suppose the last thing to consider is too that, I guess they
think
do
we need
put
a
when the
copy of
gift
the
was
letter.
received.
Can you grab us a copy of the letter? 'Cause that's the only place where I think we formalized our thinking on this. There, and maybe the letter we sent to
The school board.
school board.
Yeah, we could just stick with that standard, just try to say, there's a hard and fast standard. I mean, one thing that I've been trying to do is try to keep these judgments contextual precisely for this reason. Asking what is an appearance of a conflict of interest.
I think
It's hard to set just a set number. Remember, we had this problem of like, how many gifts can you get, how much can I do for the year? And it seemed to me that to me, I've tried to hold out the idea that it's contextual, that as people go much beyond the $50 limit, it immediately raises some concern about the gift. But then after that, the devil's in the details. This one gift, if this student is no longer a student, the former parent one, the American Express card, then they're getting it in August for maybe grades that this is the kind of thing, it's months later the students...
Unless they were in summer school.
Yeah, right, well, maybe, right?
And you don't know whether they were or not.
Yeah, right. So, agreed, and that's what I would say. That maybe we should get for these, instead of firing off the letter to these particular people, we should first get more
Well,
information.
here's a new idea. What if we drafted a form specific to gifts to teachers from parents?
And had more questions on
And
it?
had more
Like,
questions on it.
Pretty good idea. That's a pretty good idea.
Understand that she intends this to be her last meeting.
Yeah, I
so
know.
She's
Absolutely.
she's
full of ideas. It wouldn't be great if these forms were accompanied by a handwritten letter, hand-delivered to the teacher at their home,
With fresh baked cookies.
with fresh baked cookies and hand calligraphy.
I just wanted your cakes.
Fresh baked cookies. Oh dear, it's cookies from the ethics board.
All right, I'm putting it on my list to do.
Quit board.
Bake cookies.
Bake cookies.
While we're off the record, we're not. I'm actually surprised the city hasn't finished this. We're just finding somebody.
I know. I wonder what's happening there. So what someone got the nod and then withdrew? Was that?
I don't know.
I thought that was in Barbara's email that someone withdrew.
All right, well, while we're waiting on the forms, shall we move on to item B under old business, parent information paragraph?
That's a great idea.
From
Yeah, let's do
Flannery?
that, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
She doesn't have.
Which I don't have. So, that's on my list.
Yeah.
I
Good.
promise my 2 outgoing acts could be to
Could be. Yeah, what a lawyer.
Well, I'm saying.
Hey, I never said I'd do it.
All right, so 2 things to do as I'm outgoing is to draft this paragraph. I had drafted a paragraph, which I thought I could find and easily use, but I didn't keep it. Apparently I deleted it, so I don't have it anymore. So what I thought was going to be easy is now slightly more difficult because it requires me having to actually draft a paragraph.
Okay.
Okay. As difficult as that sounds. And then I could do a new form for gifts from parents to teachers with some room on it to add more questions. So some of the questions could be timing in relation to grades.
Yeah, or
Somehow
date,
phrase that.
date of gifts received, and then maybe date of
Grades submitted.
date of grade submitted.
There's also a possibility of anticipation of future students from family.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Because in
Is
elementary school, that's
this-
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah. So yeah, we should have something like
particular student.
that. Kind of questions. Do you anticipate having this student again as a student, and then do you anticipate having family members?
This is kind of slam dunk. We've done this several times for him before.
Family members. Okay. Past students. Okay. All right. While we're waiting on Barbara, we'll move
Yeah.
on to item C. Review a request for advisory opinion 2011-1. So,
What kind of opinion?
it was a request for
What's that?
advisory.
Because this one's an advisory for 2004.
It's that
You said-
email right there.
11-1. 2011-1.
That's this thing here, but I'm wondering about the numbers. Okay.
So this is the one where I don't remember if confidentiality was waived. I think it was. Okay, this is the one where an assembly member, I can't recall if confidentiality had been waived on this or not, so I don't know if I should mention the specific assembly member's name. Was going to sponsor legislation which potentially could create a conflict. And our letter in the advisory was, well, if there's a conflict, then you raise that in the assembly meeting, and the assembly members vote on that and decide whether you should be allowed to vote on the matter or not, right?
Correct.
But what she says, so this is Julia Tucker is now saying, is that that doesn't answer the question because sponsorship of legislation is an act that occurs prior to a meeting. It's not something that is raised in a meeting, that there's a number of work that or an amount of work that goes into it prior to the meeting, and so there's no way, there's sort of a gap there that without us approving, saying, this is how you should handle the conflict to the extent there is one or might appear to be one, that absent us doing that, there's no other mechanism in place for that to be handled. At least that's how I understand her complaint. Then she also raised the issue that requests for advisory opinions are supposed to be posted on the municipal website, and apparently they're not being posted. That they're supposed to be redacted and then posted, and that is not being done. So that was another issue she raised. I guess the problem in terms of reviewing this issue is that it hasn't really been brought forth to us other than in this email exchange that pointing out to us that they don't think we answered the question that they asked.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I think I need to go back and review the original complaint and then go forward. I see there's been a fair amount of email back and forth on this, but respect to publishing, that's, I suppose we rely on the clerk's office to handle that for us.
Right, and I think I did, I don't remember exactly.
Computer issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, our letter says during the course of the school year.
So apparently during our, you're talking about the next to last paragraph?
Yeah.
And we should approve them all.
Pardon me?
Because they all came after the course of the school year. We are creating a loophole, aren't we? I think you're right, Keith. I think these ones should be approved as is, but I think in future we should consider a new form to ask more questions. Alright. We're returning back to review of disclosure forms. We reviewed both the old and the new disclosure forms as one. We pulled 3 that we questioned, but it appears that all 3 were not during the course of the school year. And it looks like our letter to parents is specific to gifts received during the course of the school year. So,
Actually, this is to the teachers. The letters to the teachers.
Right. So what we've been doing is when we pull them, so the 3 that we pulled here, I would then hand these to Barbara, and Barbara would then send this letter to these 3. But it looks like this letter is not appropriate as to these 3 because it's not, these 3 were not during the course of the school year. But it may be in future that we want to revise the form and perhaps, depending on what comes of that revised form, maybe revise the letter to be more specific to other situations.
So to that, Madam Chair, would you accept a motion to approve the disclosures?
Both the old and the new disclosures?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Disclosures have all been approved. We dealt with old business B, parent information paragraph. Still on my to-do list, and I will do it. Along with a revised form, we're thinking of doing a form for gift disclosures that's specific to gifts received by teachers from parents that asks more detailed questions. So I'm gonna do that too.
Okay.
Okay? And then, we are now under item C, review of request for advisory opinion 2011-1. And board members are reviewing that issue. So I guess to get to the meat of the issue, really, on page 2, alternatives that come to mind.
If I may ask one quick question, what is sponsorship? Just the person that's sponsoring that bill? Or that person or persons? Yeah.
So Barbara, maybe you could review for us, what is the process for sponsoring? Do you understand that process pretty well? Or?
Mhm.
Yeah?
It can be done
any number of ways. A constituent can come with a request, and then Ms. Sullivan has an ordinance prepared, or they can just prepare it on their own with help of counsel. And then sometimes 2 or 3 of them say, oh, that's a great idea, I want to join on and be a co-sponsor. But then it gets put on the agenda, and it's introduced, and the Civic Code of the Charter requires that 3 people agree to the introduction. And then it's held for at least 7 days until it's voted on. So you still have to have 2 more people at least to agree to introduce it, and then you have to have 6 at least approve it.
But sponsorship doesn't necessarily have to be just the assembly person, it can be.
It does, but somebody can
Okay.
come to an assembly person and have them be a sponsor. And if the mayor does it, it's introduced by the chair at the request of the mayor. It's just a pro forma.
And as I understand the issue here, is that our letter, according to them, they don't think our letter that was sent to them answers the sponsorship question. It just answers whether or not they could work on the matter and vote on the matter.
I think her distinction that she was making was when an issue is before the body, then the body can decide. But the body can't decide before something is introduced.
My question would be, if it's not introduced, then it's not an official action, so why would anybody be making a rule of it?
And again, you have to have 2 others agree, at least 2 others agree for its introduction. Then you have to have at least 6.
Was the confidentiality waived on this one, so we can talk freely about it? About the specifics?
I think it was, let me go for the file.
2011-1.
Yeah.
So it had. If you look under this number, it kind of talks a little bit about the specifics of what he was planning to sponsor. So he's saying, like, the assembly member saying that he will not avail himself of the preference that the ordinance would create, and that would be a way to alleviate any potential conflict, because otherwise, because of his status, he might be able to benefit from the preference that the ordinance would create. That was the conflict. And when I reviewed the code, I couldn't find anything that would specifically cover this type of situation. Sponsorship.
I just don't, I don't think it's
Yeah.
just elections, so I don't know that it matters.
You don't think it's official action to sponsor, Bill?
Well, the preparing is what she's talking about, preparing. I think sponsoring it is, but then once that becomes, then they state there.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch. Is it confidential?
It's waived.
Okay.
So say he gets all the work done, he brings it before the board. He's sponsoring it, but until this.
Before the assembly?
Before the assembly. Until this point, it's theoretical. I mean, it's something they want to see happen. There's no official actions on it yet. Once he becomes a sponsor and brings it before the assembly, now it's an action that they take part of.
So what if they find a conflict, then does that mean that he then has to withdraw it? I don't know.
I would think that, I would assume that another board or another assembly member would take up sponsorship. Unless he's, upset every one of them that they won't do it, but I mean, it's similar to what you do in the legislature too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's right. When it goes before them, before introduction, these things go on the consent agenda unless somebody has a question about it. But somebody could pull it at that point, or he could ask if it was pulled, or he could pull it himself and say, I think I have a conflict, and then discuss it, and then.
So what our opinion would be is whether work leading up to that point would be a conflict or constitute official action that potentially creates a conflict.
I say if we it seems so open-ended that it could be, I mean, you could find a waterfall or a conflict with everything anybody might be introducing then. It's
I
almost
mean,
like
they all pay property taxes, and
Yeah.
they take action on property taxes.
I don't know, it just seems too.
Well, except that this is creating a preference for a specific class to which he's a member.
Yeah,
Agreed. Actually, I think that preference was already there. If this is the case, I think we're talking about.
And my sense of it is that a member might have, I mean, it's not, his only motivation for introducing it isn't that he wants to avail himself of the preference, but that he wants,
I suppose if he was that for it, he would have convinced another assembly person to sponsor
to
it
sponsor it.
in his place.
And would that,
And still have done all the work, but ask them to do it for him.
right, right.
And therefore alleviating that initial conflict.
Mhm.
I don't see how a sponsorship can be a conflict until it becomes an action, and then it's up to the assembly.
Now, they're not allowed to take a job within a year. I'm wondering if they would be precluded from from also taking advantage of, let's assume this passed. I don't know if it did or not. Would they be precluded as assembly people if they voted on this matter from taking advantage of this preference?
I don't think the code says anything about that.
Well, I guess I could, but I could extend, I can see if we can't allow somebody to take a job, which we've had several issues with, if they worked directly with that other organization and then, wrote their budget, did everything else for them, and then gave them the money and then took a job with them. I could see how we could say that if they drafted legislation and then sponsored it and took it through to completion, how they could be precluded for a period of time from.
I'm guessing that would exceed your authority as a board. That would probably take the assembly creating a code to back that up. But I'll defer to our attorney.
Who's not here.
Well, let's see, it says, so disclosure to the elected body, this is 1.15.035 C. Disclosure to the elected body prior to commitment, deliberation, or decision on a matter coming before the elected body. An elected official shall disclose any financial or private interest of the member in the matter, including a financial or private interest held by the member of the elected official's household. So it covers prior to comment, deliberation, or decision. Prior to comment, deliberation, or decision. Deliberation. It sounds like this only covers issues that are in front of the body at the meeting.
Right, because besides this code, they all operate, well, all meetings do, operate within the open meeting statute at the state level, and then we have some additional things in our code too. And not more than 3 of them can meet and confer about anything. So they couldn't take official action without being in a public meeting.
Yeah.
So if it's more than 3, they have to provide notice and have.
Mhm.
Okay.
We notice assembly persons' weddings. We notice if there's going to be a fundraiser that we think that more than 3 will go to. We notice anything that we take that in.
Now, if they should perhaps find themselves at a place at the same time by accident.
We've had, in the past, we've had a CDA meeting, a Chamber of Commerce, where the 4th one would get up and leave. But,
Really?
yeah.
Oh, did you get a
Pretty.
from someone in the
Yeah, we actually made the ear at Brian Whittle's wedding. Because we said, oh, I suppose they noticed it. And our, she made some funny thing about it. I called her the next day and I said, Sheila, we did notice it. She goes, you're kidding. I said, nope. We're really careful about this stuff. So anyway, I think structurally it seems to me that if it's on the agenda for introduction and the meeting is convened and somebody would pull it off the agenda and the sponsor could make the question at that point.
And then they could tell them how to deal with the conflict, which is what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So do we need to tell them all of that, in your opinion? Or is this particular issue already been dealt with?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, the sponsorship thing is interesting, yeah, it is. We did miss it, or at least I missed it. But that is participation in official action, including sponsorship. So I'm inclined to say that sponsorship is an official action, that it's not included in the kind of things that 35C is talking about. And that people should come to us first if they think they have a conflict.
You think it's official action, why?
Speak of the devil.
You're reading Julia's memo?
Yeah.
Well, it's official action because sponsorship is what an assembly person has to do to be able to bring
Right, they have to do
something
it.
to the meeting. So yeah, it's something. So they're acting in their official capacity as assembly person in the procedures by which the ordinance is brought to the assembly meeting.
Okay.
So I would call that an official action.
But to Robin's point, okay, so I've got a conflict, because I'm a disabled veteran. So I take it over to Chris Burton and say, you're not a veteran, would you please sponsor this for me and find 2 other people?
And you
The
tell
action
them.
still happens. So I don't see, it's a moot point, I guess.
Well, it's like I don't know.
I mean, yeah, like we told the mayor, have
We told
somebody
the
else bring it
mayor,
in.
have
yeah.
someone else bring it in for you, right?
We've told that, yeah, a number of times, yeah. Figure out, find some other way to get it sponsored and to get it in. It takes 2 sponsors to get it in. Maybe you can't find the other sponsor. It might make a difference.
If you can't find another sponsor, then it's not
Then it's not gonna go
pass.
good. Because you need
You're just
6 to
wasting
pass,
time and
so.
energy at that point.
So come to us for management of the conflict. All right.
I just have to imagine that in the long line of the assembly, that a number of sponsorships have been brought up that people have had conflicts with,
Yeah.
and that this has not been an issue before. And so I still don't see where it falls under us.
Do you mind if we take a 5-minute break so I can read through this real quickly?
Sure, we could finish reading it too at the same time.
Though I have to remind
Well, you have
everyone,
to
I'm
leave.
leaving in about 10 minutes.
Well,
Do you want to change the order of the day?
Yeah, we could take care of a new agenda item while he's on D.
Oh yeah, and just to clean things up, if we're, what's the official mechanism by which we're talking about this today?
There isn't.
Gotcha.
Amended agenda.
So after this somewhat acerbic analysis of the opinion and our violations of procedure, Julia wants us just to sort of just talk about it at our meeting.
Well, I asked that it be put on the agenda under old business review of request for advisory opinion 2011-1 because it appears that we did not answer the question that was asked. So I'm wondering if we can even consider that closed now that it's been brought to our attention that we didn't actually address the correct question.
You'd have, I guess
We didn't understand the question at the time it was asked. It was part of the problem because right?
Right.
So, do we just let sort of a half-answered question lay out there on an opinion that was requested that we didn't really answer? I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose we could,
You could reconsider.
we
move
could,
to
we
re-
could, we could send it, yeah, we could put out a revised opinion, right? The code, certainly, I don't think there's anything in the code that prevents us from,
Well,
doing
and
that.
particularly not under the advisory opinion.
Well, that's right. I
The
mean,
advisory
it's-
opinions are designed to educate and to help guide people's actions so that they don't have a violation. Okay, so while we let that one
Soak in.
soak in, yes. Let's go on to request
Better
for.
than fester.
That's the one word I could come up with. Oh, no.
Well, we let that one soak in a little. Let's go to request for advisory opinion 2011-4, where confidentiality has been waived. It seems to me as though there's a lack of information on this one.
If I may, Madam Chair,
Yes.
this person came to us last year with exactly the same thing.
Right.
Mr. Dooley has a firm that he sells athletic gear and does printing and whatnot.
Uh,
And we, at least last year, we approved.
it.
Yeah.
But he's also a coach, which, yeah, he didn't put a whole lot of information in here.
And last year when he came before us, he said that he's not involved in the bid process. Right, or he doesn't have any influence
No, it's just
or
that he
decision.
and a couple other firms, there's only a few firms in Anchorage that do this kind of business.
yes, and as I recall, didn't we tell him, I think we told him to do something like this. I think we told him
I
yearly
said-
to give us an
pretty sure-
update because we wanted to know how many
Rather
bids.
than
and we
have to
thought-
have one for every single bid,
Bid.
we suggested do one a year.
Yeah.
Well, and that he update us each year on the number he was anticipating of doing. I think there was some concern that if he was going to be suddenly doing a lot more bids than this, that maybe we would have to rethink allowing him just to do a blanket waiver or a blanket disclosure rather than just one disclosure. So I imagine it's a response to that because I think we told him to do that.
Yeah, that's how I remember it as well.
Does anyone have any further questions? Do we want anything else from him, or are we satisfied and request for advisory though?
I'm
Yeah, it's
wondering
funny,
if
he's
it's
trying to
right,
use it as a
because actually he's
disclosure,
working,
right?
what he says here when you read this is he's looking for an approval of the filing of a periodic annual notice. This may not be the proper form to give that.
There was no real vehicle to bring it before you, I think is what my staff had took this and thought.
Yeah, I think because that's what we did last time. I think we wrote an advisory opinion, didn't we, to him, saying, yeah, you may, we hereby grant you permission to do that.
So maybe that's a hole in the code that should be looked at.
With respect to a form.
Or another form that needs to be created
You're so good at that.
by Chair Flannery. Chair, 1 foot out the door. What else can I get off my list? Well, at least for Mr. Dooley, I'd recommend that we just go ahead and do what we did last time and send him an advisory letter saying, yes, you have our permission to,
I'm sure we'll hear from the gentleman who works on the air guns.
We told him the same thing, as I
Yeah.
recall, right? So we should be hearing back, But that was my recollection for Dooley, that we had that one concern about like, well, wait a minute, what if we allow you to do this and then suddenly the volume of business you do changes dramatically? And I think that's what we told him to do, is just yearly give us an update with the estimated number of bids he'd be doing.
So the code says notice under this section must be filed for each solicitation unless the board has specifically approved the filing of a periodic notice by the municipal employee. So we have approved it.
I'm wondering if a disclosure
Oh.
notice has been better formed for him to
He's
file.
Well,
done
it
more of those
says
as well.
Yeah.
The board
I
may
read it
approve the
earlier.
filing of a periodic notice on no less than an annual basis. Application by employee demonstrating the nature of the work relationship between municipal employee and the administrative unit soliciting the work. Yeah, we need a new form. Darn it.
Well, on the first issue, should we make a motion to?
Yeah. Do I have a motion on Mr. Dooley's request?
Yeah, I would advise that we, or recommend that we, I would move that we send an advisory to Mr. Dooley, granting him permission to file his periodic/annual notice for the business that he does with the school district.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we need a motion on the form or just an acknowledgement that we need another form?
I think that's fine.
Okay. Draft form for annual. Well, I guess they call them periodic notice. Although up here it says.
Oh, yeah, it's
annual.
periodic, I think, what, no more than annually.
Annual basis. No less than. With these, the specific, can you wanna draft the form?
Okay.
With the specifics, so E, it's 1.15.025 E1, and it lists the specifics of what need to be addressed. Have to demonstrate the nature of the work, the relationship between the municipal employee and the administrative unit soliciting the work. So it could be very similar to this form, maybe just a little more questioning as to the role. You might want to look back at the advisory opinion, the role of the employee or the connection between the employee and the process for selecting the bidder. Okay.
And then another thing specific to this one is how we notice it, where we notice it, so that anytime any solicitation comes up, other vendors realize that this is there.
Right. Okay, so that one's done. Are you ready on review of advisory 2011-1?
Sure.
So we
I've
have
read it.
one board member who thinks that sponsoring is official action, and we have one member who thinks sponsoring is not official action. Sponsoring does seem like official action to me.
Well, I think
that
once
right?
once it's introduced, it's official. But until it's introduced, I don't believe it is.
I would think sponsorship is an official action. I think what you're getting at is Julia's point that the voting creates the conflict of interest, or is that where your opportunity, maybe Barbara's brought that up.
Yeah,
So you're distinguishing between sponsorship and introduction?
What I'm saying is,
Oh, excuse me.
you put this, you have an idea to put forward before the assembly.
Right.
So technically, you're acting as the sponsor, but until it's actually introduced to the assembly, it's not anything. It's just an idea. So once it becomes introduced, now you're a sponsor. And at that point, then it's an it's an official action. So I'm just saying it's the before stuff, getting it ready. I mean, otherwise, everybody has conflicts of interest on almost, or a lot of them would have
That
conflicts
would
of
be
interest.
consistent with our prior advice, I think.
Yeah.
Where we said the certain act triggered the official action.
But
And
it's-
I had two things. One is there's the Open Meetings Act, which precludes them from gathering and discussing things unless they're in a public meeting that's been noticed. And the second thing is, it takes 2 other members to introduce, so let's put it on the consent agenda. If a member was sponsoring a bill, he's not just coming, if he pulled it at that point, prior to introduction, and as it's being introduced, in a public meeting with all of his peers, or her peers would say, I have potential conflict of interest, and then they would deal with the process as a body in public session.
After sponsorship.
The person's name, the person's name was on the thing, but it would not be introduced until the conflict had been dealt with, potential conflict.
So it's put on the agenda. So is putting it on the agenda official action?
Well, to me, it's similar to your concern with running around the table and testifying, the mere fact that,
Yeah, didn't we ask those questions in the hand commission thing? Weren't we
Yeah.
asking people, how did that even get on the agenda? Were you involved in that decision? I mean, we were talking about setting the agenda as an official action. And I think it is. I think it's what...
and I think sponsorship says a lot. The assembly want to sponsor things because of their standing in the community, and so I would lean toward, I think it would fall under an interpretation that is official action.
I would think so too. Again, I'm sorry, I've got to run. My boy's going to turn into a pumpkin in 15 minutes. But that's my take. I'll leave you with my take, and you can. It's worth what you paid for it. Nothing. That I think it is a gap. I think you're absolutely right. I think it is official action. It's forbidden by B. I think the reason why we missed it is that C doesn't. We focused on C, and C doesn't actually address that. C talks about stuff that's going on in the meeting, like deliberation, commenting, things like that. So I think it actually falls outside of what's going on in C, which means I do think people need to come to us. It is a potential. It's not whether it's a conflict or not. The code forbids it, and so they do need to come to us and ask us. Do they actually have the kind of substantial interest that the code is forbidden in this case? I think we're the only ones who could do it. It's too late once the assembly meeting starts. To add a wrinkle, I would add, I think on that particular issue, then it's actually not up to the assembly whether someone's conflicted. I think it's actually up to us. I think the part that reserves the decision ultimately to the assembly is about stuff that's going on in the assembly meeting. We don't have to get into that, though. That would be dicta, as they like to say, right? So, but that's my take at any rate. That
We still have a quorum, right? 3, I think. We're good? Okay. And just so you know, you will be voted in as chair later in the meeting.
Yeah, you will accept if nominated and elected, will you not?
oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But Robin, you're giving me a ride to the daycare center, right? She's coming. Thank you. Sorry
Nice
about
try.
that.
Nice try.
It took me a minute to realize what he was doing.
When you brought it up in the light of, we required them to bring up the ethics, and how they would handle, like we did with respect to the mayor, have somebody else handle it. And one way around the one way around any of these can do this is to manage the conflict that they know in themselves they have. In this particular case, it's pretty obvious, at least to me, it's obvious that there's a potential conflict. Because this individual would be in the class of people that were going to be getting the preference. That if you can get somebody else to introduce to sponsor the bill.
Right, but I think at this point, are we being asked at this point how to manage the conflict, or just telling them what to do? We are being asked how to...
No, I agree with your point. I think there's a difference.
Oh, okay, so I don't think we have to get into that much detail at this point. I think we can just tell them that introduction or sponsorship, however you want to put it,
I'm fine with
is
how they
official
say it.
action. There's potential for conflict, and it's a situation where it can't be dealt with in front of the body. It has to be dealt with in advance, and the only way in which it could be dealt with in advance is if it's presented to us and we're allowed to assist you in determining how to manage the
Okay.
conflict.
Or you find an additional sponsor.
Well, see, that's then we're
Then
giving
you're
them
telling
how,
them to manage it
then we're
then.
telling them how to manage it, but I don't know if we're prepared to do that at this point. I mean, it might, I don't know. What's-
So
Well, I
that
mean,
was-
that's an obvious solution. If they don't
Right.
have to come before the ethics board, then they can seek that path. So there's a reason that, you can presume there's a reason that Mr. Trini wanted to remain a sponsor on this particular matter versus asking someone else
To do it.
to do it.
I mean, I can understand why he'd want to. I mean, it's-
So in this case, his request was he asking us how to manage it? Was that what his request for advisory was? So
No, I
maybe
don't
we
know if
do
we
need to get
have
into that
that.
detail.
I don't recall, there's this,
Let's see.
I don't remember it either.
we really get down in the weeds on some of these things.
Jeez. I am seeking an advisory opinion that would address my participation in official action, including sponsorship, disabled veterans preference ordinance that would create better preference for disabled veterans and award municipal contracts. I have no financial interest in the outcome of this ordinance. I will be disclosing my disabled veteran status to the body. I will confirm to the Assembly that my private interest and members of the class of disabled veterans does not prevent me from placing the public interest first and foremost in the matter.
I've got one problem with this, and I may be off base, but you're being asked to participate in the legislative process. If there's a bad action by an assembly member that somebody brings a notice of potential violation, that's, to me, different. You're dealing with their action, but this is a true part of the legislative process.
And Barbara, I had the same concern. There's sort of some jurisdictional questions
Right.
here, overlay, and
I mean, I would just assume, leave it at the assembly level. But,
no, this may be a type of matter that you ask your attorney to look into it a little bit further. I think these are sort of heady questions to be resolved at a quick meeting like this when you've just been presented with the issues. There are some jurisdictional legislative process issues, and though I hate to volunteer for something like this, it seems like it probably deserves some type of report, recommendation, or something from your attorney. To look over, Julia had 3 or 4 suggestions, rather than trying to make an on-the-spot decision about a question that does have some legal issues underlying it, for the next meeting.
So you're suggesting we table it?
With the request to your attorney that I take it up and at least come back with some additional information, advice, recommendation for your consideration. And as your attorney, I don't feel comfortable that we've explored some of the underlying legal issues in sort of a thoughtful manner, and certainly to impose that on the board in a quick monthly meeting is asking a lot.
You'd either have to make the motion or second, so.
Well,
I'm fine.
Okay, I just want to talk about it a little bit more.
Oh, and that's fine.
On the topic of sort of inserting ourselves into the legislative process, so they've taken us out of that when it comes to conflicts. The body gets to decide, and then we get to review it only if we think
The sufficiency of the disclosure.
the sufficiency of disclosure
Is our review.
is what we get to review.
So they've limited us from, I think, in the second guessing role. That's, the code has limited the board. This,
So in the first instance, we don't get to decide, the body gets to decide.
right, I think if I, and
But
I
that's on,
apologize, I don't have my code with me. Thank you.
Comment, deliberation, or discussion on the matter.
She chews me out when I don't bring it.
I was on my way down here and pulled into another meeting. I think the intent of that limitation is different than an overall conflict investigation. In other words, that they don't want they don't want the ethics board second guessing assembly determinations.
We do that in public all the time.
Marissa, do you have the code section?
35, 15.035D. The elected body shall be the final authority on whether the financial or private interest as disclosed is substantial under this chapter. The board does not have jurisdiction to reweigh the factors considered by the elected body for differing interpretation of the board of substantial interest by the board of substantial interest. Factors appropriate for consideration include one or more of the following. So what do we have authority to do?
Well, to me, this is, the board doesn't have the authority to substitute its judgment for the judgment of the assembly. But in this case, on the sponsorship, there is no judgment by the assembly. Action happens before the assembly can look at it. So it's not a question of substituting your judgment. It's still a respect for the different.
It's just a hole in the code.
Can you explain that?
Well, I mean, there's nothing, it seems like there's nothing written to address the situation, so we would just be making.
Well, or that this paragraph doesn't address it, that this provision. So then do we go back to our usual conflict of interest, where someone does a request and you determine, one, if there's a conflict, and two, what the management would be. So isn't Mr. Trainee just asking us to go back to that process because this particular provision doesn't even apply?
Yeah. Let's see. So it is under B then. Elected official may not participate in any official action in which the elected official or a member of the elected official's household has a substantial financial interest.
What is this financial interest in this one? Is that-
He is a 60% veteran, he's partially disabled, so therefore he could bid his department on city work.
Again, I think there is a question of whether official action takes place outside of a official meeting, a public meeting, which is because at the point of introduction, then it becomes an issue before the body. And if they choose not to introduce it because they think this conflict is too great, then it doesn't come before the body.
Or it doesn't come under the body under that person's sponsorship name, but they have figured out, as Robin stated, that how to get around their.
And I don't know, Dee, I'm just thinking it through.
And then at which point, when it comes up for discussion, then the assembly person says, I have a conflict here, and they decide whether or not that person can vote, which would be a way to manage.
Well, it's odd because he says I have no financial interest, substantial or insubstantial, in the outcome of this ordinance. But he is above the 50% threshold. He's 60%.
But it does say this has come up. The issue of sponsorship and conflict are important to come up in the assembly a couple times in the same context. So this isn't specific to this particular issue. This is more for.
Well, and that's why I feel that, I think all sponsorships, or not all sponsorships, but there is sponsorships that are going to be a conflict for who's ever sponsoring them. And I don't see as that being a problem, because once it's introduced, then you make your notice of conflict, and then it becomes resolved at the assembly level. So. I'm just thinking outside. If a constituent asks an assembly person, for something for their district, to introduce something for their district, the assembly person is automatically conflicted because it's something for their district. I mean,
Well, there was the one case, there's one, yeah, we probably need to look into this more. There was a case with the ownership of the land over on Muldoon,
Mhm.
when they were putting in the shopping center there. And I don't remember what the official action that was taken there was, whether it was sponsorship or voting on.
And it was,
And
it was
the
Dan
exa-
Coffey.
It was voting on.
It was voting?
And an action that would have changed a stoplight, as I recall.
but was he the sponsor of it as well?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
believe so.
No.
I don't think so.
And that, in that case, they determined that his voting on it was improper? Do you remember?
The court did.
The court did.
This is after he apparently had disclosed it to the assembly. The assembly had said okay, apparently. Then the court turned around and still says it's improper,
Correct.
even though per their rules.
Well, the court can second guess.
Yeah, all the time.
The court decided that, I think the assembly thought his interest in the property there wasn't substantial. The court thought that it was.
Mhm.
And I think part of the discussion was they didn't know if this was going to enhance or hurt. They didn't know what impact would be. That, so it could have hurt, it could have brought the property value down as well as raised it.
So the voting on issue has been addressed, but the sponsorship question is still out there.
I don't know if there's any legal determination of whether, nationwide, whether sponsorship is an official action. And my non-legal opinion thinks it very much is, but you're putting your position and naming the community behind a measure.
Okay. I have the sense that we need to think about this more and have Dee look into it some. Discuss it further at the next meeting.
Then I'd like a motion that we hold on to this till the next meeting, and in the meantime ask our attorney to please look into this to fill us with more information.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Discussion of how to notify teachers of gift issues.
This was, Marcia, wasn't this you coming up with a paragraph to
Well, the
put into
paragraph is
newsletter?
higher up.
Oh, is
It's
it?
B under old business, so I don't know what this C is.
I think this actually should
Was
have been
this-
old business, I think this was on the agenda last time.
Was it?
It was like how, it may not have been, but I think the issue of it is after the teacher came in with the airline tickets,
Mm-hmm.
what's our process? She seemed to feel insulted that it went to Eric Tollefson, and then somebody else had opened her
Oh.
private letter, and so I think that was the
Well, they
genesis
wouldn't
of
give
this.
us their home addresses. Wasn't that the issue?
That's an
Yeah.
issue she's got within the school district as to the privacy of her mail.
Well, I think it came about from a discussion between Eric and I that we thought that was the best way to guarantee the privacy of the
Was it to come
Teacher.
from Eric?
yeah, that it would be sent to him, and I guess, I was assuming under confidential cover and then be handed to her, versus it gets into her mailbox, it gets opened, or,
Do you want me to take this and talk to Eric and then bring it back next meeting?
Okay. Barbara, put your name next to that one. All right, item D, elect a chair. Do we have any nominations?
Madam Chair, I nominate, in your absence, since you declined to continue your seat, I nominate Dr. Kelly.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Member comments? adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Fine. I get the feeling that we do a lot of the.
I was gonna say, you
adjourning.
guys get to do a lot.
If you look at the minutes, you know, you
Yeah.
and I are doing all the motions and seconds, yeah.